Hello friends, welcome to EPG Pathshala. Today we are going to discuss conceptual and operational definition of continuous and discrete variables. This lecture is a part of your paper on communication research. The basic postulates of quantitative communication research is based on enumeration and quantification. Such enumeration is possible on the basis of identification of certain independent and dependent variables. Essentially, a variable may be characterized as a set of attributes possessed by the individual, institution, or the subjects under research. These may be straightforward or complex and may also include other sets of subvariables. According to Postman and Egan, a variable is a characteristic or attribute that can take on a number of values. In simple terms, a variable is a measurable characteristic that we can measure, manipulate, and control. For example, individuals may differ in sex, age, height, weight, education, intelligence, and many other ways. Such qualities exhibiting differences are called variables. An operational definition describes variable in terms of the operations used to produce it or techniques used to measure it. Demographic variables such as age or ethnic group are usually measured by checking official records or simply by asking the participant to choose the appropriate category from among those listed. Abstract concepts like mastery, motivation need to be defined operationally by spelling out in some detail how they are measured. To do this, the investigator may provide sample questions, append the instrument, or provide a reference where more information can be found. Variables are important for the following reasons. Variables and the relationships between them form the basis of a scientific research study. The research instrument comprises of tools that takes of the measurement of variables. These variables must be enumerated or manipulated for the research study to be valid. Classification of variables. Qualitative and quantitative variables. Variables whose values result from counting or measuring something are called quantitative variables. It is the information about quantities that can be measured and written down with numbers. Items sold and time are all quantitative variables, while the information about those variables that are not measured variables and whose values do not result from counting are called qualitative or categorical variables. Religion, color of hair, political party, etc. are all qualitative variables. Univariate versus bivariate data. Study that looks at one only variable is called univariate variable. Univariate data doesn't deal with cause and relationship. The main purpose of the univariate data is to describe. For example, studying the average weight or average height of the students is an example of univariate variable, while as the study that looks at onto variables is called bivariate analysis. Bivariate data deals with causes or relationships. The major purpose of the bivariate data is to explain. For example, studying the relationship between the weight and height of the high school students is an example of bivariate analysis. Variables that can be further classified in various types. Independent variable. A stimulus variable which operates either within a person or within the environment and affect the human behavior is called independent variable. For example, if a researcher wants to see the relationship between noise and task performance. Here, in this example, noise is the independent variable. Dependent variable. There are certain variables used for research process which may be observed and measured through responses that have an independent effect, may be called as a dependent variable. It is often denoted by letter Y, and it changes due to the change in the independent variable. In the above mentioned example, where noise is the independent variable, task performance is the dependent variable. Relationship between independent and dependent variables values that can be changed or controlled by the experimenter in a given model or equation are called independent variable, while as the values that result from independent variable are called dependent variable. Independent variable is what you can change in an experiment, and dependent variable is what changes. Dichotomous variable. Variable that takes into account only one of only two possible values and are often labeled as 0 and 1 are called dichotomous variable. Example, male, female, improved, not improved. These dichotomous variables can be used either as independent or dependent variables. Latent variable. Latent variables are underlying variables that can't be observed. It is often hypothesized to exist such type of variables in order to explain other variables. For example, a specific behavior that can't be observed is a latent variable. Mediating variable. Variables that transmits the indirect effect of the independent variable on the dependent variable are called mediation variables. These variables causes mediation in the dependent and independent variable and plays an important role in seeing the relationship between the dependent and the independent variable. Moderating variable. Variables that influences or moderates the relation between two other variables and produces the interaction effect are called moderator variable. These variables are often denoted by M and are often called as a third variable. Moderator variables are measured, manipulated, and selected by the experimenter to discover whether it modifies the relationship between independent and a dependent variable. Gender, area of location, etc. generally function as moderator variables. Intervening variable. There are certain variables which may not be studied or observed but have a deep impact on the research process are called intervening variables. Their effects must be inferred from the effect of the independent and the moderator variables on the observed phenomena. Attitude of the subject, learning process, habit, and interest are all intervening variables which can't be seen or measured during the experiment or study. Dummy variable. A numerical variable which is used in regression analysis to represent subgroups of a sample is called dummy variable. It is often used to distinguish between treatment groups. Codes 0 and 1 are often used as a dummy variable where a person is given a value of 0 if they are in the control group and 1 if they are in a treatment group. Dummy variables are useful in single regression equations in order to represent multiple groups. They act like switches that turn parameters on and off in an equation. Control variable. Variables which are controlled by the experimenter in order to cancel or neutralize the effect on the observed phenomena are called control variable. These are the variables which an examiner doesn't wish to study. When a control variable is controlled, the researcher can study the moderator effect of the variables. Certain variables which appear repeatedly as control variables are sex, intelligence, noise, task order, and task content. Confounding variable. An uncontrolled extraneous variable that is related to the independent variable and provide an alternative explanation of the results is called as a confounding variable. These variables are correlated directly or indirectly to both the dependent and the independent variables, and its effect can't be separated from the effect of the independent variable. Discrete versus continuous variables. Quantitative variables can be classified as discrete or continuous variable. Categorical or discrete variable taken any value between its minimum and maximum value is called a continuous variable. Otherwise, it is called discrete variable. Qualities like height and weight are continuous variables since they can be measured in smaller decimals, while as qualities like the number of gadgets in a household are discrete and cannot be measured in decimal points. A series is said to be discontinuous when it exhibits a real gap between one value and the next. The data regarding such variables can only be expressed in whole units or numbers. Example, number of children in a family, number of eggs laid by hen, number of printing mistakes in a book, etc. Discrete or qualitative variables are further categorized as nominal or ordinal variables. Nominal variable. Variables having two or more than two categories without any order are called nominal variables. Nominal variables assign numbers as labels to identify objects. However, the assigned number cannot carry any additional meaning except as identifiers. Assigning roll numbers in classroom, gender, school, and yes-no questions are examples of nominal scale of measurement. Ordinal variables. Unlike nominal scale, ordinal scales assigns numbers to objects to reflect a rank or ordering. In addition to providing nominal information, it refers to order and direction in measurement. Ordinal variables can be ranked in logical order, but it is not necessary that the interval between the variables are known. No, maybe, yes, faster, slower, and low, medium, high are examples of ordinal scale of measurement. For example, if a researcher wants to know the 10 richest people in India, the wealthiest Indian would receive a score of 1, the next richest a score of 2, and so on through 10. Continuous variable. Variable that is scored in such a way that the numbers or values indicate some sort of amount is called a continuous variable. According to Urdan, continuous variables do not indicate more or less of a certain quality. For example, height is a continuous variable because higher scores on this variable indicate a greater amount of height. Continuous variables are measured but cannot be counted. It forms a continuous series, and a series is said to be continuous when it is capable of any degree of subdivision and in practice shows no real gaps. A variable is said to be continuous when it passes from one value to the next by indefinitely small changes. Example: height, weight, length, temperature, time, distance, etc. Continuous variables, which are also known as quantitative variables, are further categorized into interval and ratio variables. Interval variables, variables that can be measured along a continuum and have numeric values, are called interval scale of measurement. In this, numbers are assigned to objects such that the difference between the numbers can be meaningfully interpreted. Interval variables are counted values, and the interval between the numbers is known to be equal. Temperature in degrees Celsius or Fahrenheit is an example of interval scale of measurement. Ratio variable. Besides having all the characteristics of nominal, ordinal and interval scales of measurement, ratio scale has an absolute zero. It is the most informative level of measurement. Examples include the temperature in Kelvin, weight, area, speed, reaction time and velocity are measured on the ratio scale of measurement. Difference between discrete and continuous variable. Finite set of data with a countable number of values are called discrete variable, while an infinite set of data with an uncountable number of values are called continuous variables. The range of specified number is complete in case of discrete variables, while as it is incomplete in case of continuous variables. In discrete variable, the values can be obtained by counting, while as the continuous variable are the random variables that measures something. Variables assuming independent values are called discrete variables, while variables assuming any value in a given range are called continuous variables. Variables which can be graphically represented by isolated points are called discrete variables, while the variables which can be represented with connected points are called continuous variables. Summary. We have learned about variables, its importance and its types such as qualitative versus quantitative variables, discrete versus continuous, and univariate versus bivariate variables. Further, we've also learned about other variables like independent, dependent, control, extraneous, moderating, moderator, dummy, and dichotomous variables in general, and discrete and continuous variables in particular. In the discrete and continuous variables, we have further discussed broadly about the measurement scales such as nominal, ordinal, interval and ratio scales. Do attempt a question in the self-evaluating quadrant. For further reading suggestions, please refer to the third quadrant. Thank you.
20 minutes.